This is your government video for the horizontal and vertical separation of powers. We've already talked about the traditional separation of powers that was put into the Constitution, and that's the idea that we separate the government into three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. And each of those branches has its own powers separate from each of the other branches. Then they also put in some checks and balances to allow each of those separate powers to have a little bit of power over the other. But they also put in federalism. And federalism is the balance of power between federal, state, and local government. So we have a vertical or layers of government. This also separates our government. So if you take a look here, on the federal level, we have legislative, executive, and judicial branch. We have a federal Congress, the executive is the president, and in the judicial branch, we have a Supreme Court, and we also have an entire system of federal courts, including district courts, which are the trial courts, and appeals courts. The state level, we have the same thing, traditional separation of powers. Each state has its own state legislative branch, including a House and Senate in most states. The executive for the state government is the governor, and each state has a state Supreme Court as well as a state series of courts, typically called superior courts, and there are also state appeals courts. Local government does the same thing. The legislative branch on the local level is typically a city council, and the executive is the mayor, and the mayor is usually on the city council or is the head of the city council. And we also have local courts. These are things like traffic courts. So we have all three of these separated powers at all three levels: federal, state, and local. So your traditional separation of powers are horizontal, and then federalism is the vertical separation between federal, state, and local. Because your federal government checks your state government and your state government checks your local government. So they're creating a grid of checks and balances so that we don't have too much power, and so that we can keep the government small and not tyrannical.